All right, everyone, and welcome to week 19. And we are reading chapters 9 through 10 of Lord of the Flies this week. I cannot believe, as I always say, that it is already week 19, but we really are getting so very close to the end. The 21st is practically June, right? All right, don't forget to watch the weekly overview videos. I do think it is helpful to have a face and a voice to guide you through the assignments. And you are reading chapters 9 through 10. You are always, always, always welcome to read ahead, so please feel free. You are so close to the end, you might as well just finish this thing. You have two assignments this week. Let's take a look at what those are. You have a quick write for chapters 9 and 10. So your prompt this week deals with Simon's chapter 9 murder. Are the boys guilty of murder? Why or why not? How does mass hysteria play a part in their actions? So, chapter 10 comes into this as well because chapter 10 is really the boys dealing with the fallout from this. But who is culpable in the murder of Simon? Who is responsible? Who should be guilty? Should they all be guilty? Who is at fault? Use specific quotes and incidents and examples to support your argument here. There's any number of ways you can argue this. Make sure you pay attention to the rubric as you do your work. The discussion this week is very similar to your quick write. So the prompt is watch the TED Talk and pay attention to the events leading up to and during Simon's chapter 9 death. What is the root cause of this horrible incident? Was it an accident? Should the boys be held accountable? Are the boys turning into dangerous psychopaths? Is this mass hysteria? So you can use at least part of what you wrote for your quick write here if it's relevant and if it discusses the same things. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So you can use that, but I really want you to discuss where this comes from, where the behavior comes from that leads to Simon's death. Watch the TED Talk because this is a really great TED Talk. We're going to talk about that one here on the next slide to talk about psychopathy and really how do we define psychopathic behavior. Here's that TED Talk, John Ronson. And this is a really interesting TED Talk just in talking about the different definitions and diagnoses involved around particularly psychopathy, right? How do I say that you're a psychopath? And it's an amusing TED Talk as well, but check this one out before you answer the questions because it might give you some more material to use. All right, guys, so let's talk about the book a little bit here. I want to walk you through chapters 9 and 10, and then I want to talk about a little bit about how Karl Jung relates to all of this too. Okay, so chapter 9 is titled A View to a Death. Simon got to his feet. The light was unearthly. The Lord of the Flies hung on his stick like a black ball. Even with great care, the best he could do was stagger. So the chapter opens with Simon, who we left at the end of chapter 8 up in the woods. He hasn't eaten, he hasn't had anything to drink. We knew that Simon was kind of succumbing to the stress of the situation. And it's easy to make the assessment that he has maybe had a little bit of a break with reality here. He's lost a little bit of a grip on reality. He has been hallucinating that this pig head that they stuck on a stick in the middle of the woods has been talking to him. He's given it a name. It's the Lord of the Flies. It is speaking to him. So Simon, in the throes of this mental episode, begins staggering down the mountain towards the camp, which is a remarkably dangerous place to go. Ralph and Piggy have even joined the party, but Jack and all of his hunters have a big fire going. They're cooking pig. They're all frenzied. Has everyone eaten as much as they want? His tone conveyed a warning, given out of pride and ownership. Jack is running the show right now. He is running it. He allows Ralph and Piggy to join them at the fire and he gives them some food to eat, but he is making it very clear that they are there at his discretion and with his permission, right? Jack is running the show. All right, Simon is stumbling down the mountain, the more right into an increasingly unhinged party that Jack and the rest of the boys are partaking in. This is a terrible thing to watch because I'm watching Simon stumble down the mountain. I'm watching the boys get increasingly frenzied and they start playing that horrible game where they pretend like one of the boys is a pig and they're going to poke at it with their sticks and they're going to pretend like they're killing it and everyone is chanting. Jack says, "Who'll join my tribe and have fun?" And then they all go crazy. Kill the beast, cut his throat, spill his blood. They're all playing this horrible game, and they're all crazy when Simon stumbles out of the dark and into the light of the fire. A thing was crawling out of the forest. It came darkly, uncertainly. The shrill screaming that rose before the beast was like a pain. They don't see him as being a person anymore. They don't see him as being a human. It is a monster climbing out of the woods, and they all are armed with spears and rocks. The beast struggled forward. Broke the ring, and fell over the steep edge of the rock to the sand by the water. At once the crowd surged after it. And then sometime later, Simon's dead body moved out towards the open sea. So Simon has been killed by all of these boys. They have stabbed and beat him to death. And even when he tried to get away, even when he fell off of the edge and onto the sand, they followed him. They still ceased to recognize that this was a human that they were attacking. Chapter 10 sees the fallout. Chapter 10, the shell and the glasses. That was murder. You stop it. What good are you doing talking like that? So it's Ralph who's willing to accept it. He says that was murder. He keeps saying that was Simon. It's Piggy who keeps saying, stop it. What good are you doing talking like that? It was an accident. That's what it was, an accident. Coming in the dark, he had no business crawling like that out of the dark. Piggy, and I'm kind of surprised at Piggy in this chapter. Piggy's reaction is to victim blame here and say, well, Simon had it coming. Simon's fault. Simon shouldn't have crawled out of the woods acting like that. He should have known better. What did he think was going to happen when he crawled out into a party like that? Guilt is consuming both of them. They are both feeling equally guilty. It's just they're having different reactions. Ralph's reaction is to accept responsibility. Piggy's reaction is to deny, deny, deny. And they both try to justify by saying that they were on the outside of the circle. They're both trying at the end of this. They're both saying, well, we were on the outside of the circle. We didn't actually land any blows on him. Maybe we didn't actually draw any blood. So maybe we aren't culpable. Maybe it's not our fault. Meanwhile, in Chapter 10, Jack has taken control of the boys and is officially known to them as the Chief. They stop calling him Jack and they start calling him the Chief. Remember what Philip Zimbardo talked about, the dehumanization thing and the mask thing. When he talks about the idea, it works both ways. Dehumanization can mean that I am going to treat you worse because I don't see you as human. It can also mean I'm going to elevate you and blindly follow you because I don't see you as human, right? I see you as being the chief. You're not Jack or fallible anymore. You are the chief. So meanwhile, Ralph is struggling to keep the fire lit on the beach, and he has a few stragglers that are there with him. He was a chief now in truth, and he made his stabbing motion with his spear. With his spear from his left hand dangled Piggy's broken glasses. Okay, so Jack and his followers attack Ralph and Piggy on the beach, and they steal Piggy's glasses, leaving Piggy helpless. His vision is such that he cannot get around without some vision, without his glasses. And it also leaves Ralph and Piggy helpless to keep the signal fire going. It also is a really defining moment saying us and them. Ralph and Piggy are no longer welcome to join Jack's crew, right? They're no longer welcome. They are on their own. So if they're going to get rescued, they're on their own. If they're going to die, they're on their own. If they're going to survive, they're on their own. This is a really violent action. That's where we leave them in Chapter 10. All right, so let's talk about this in regard to the psychology that we have been discussing so far. Carl Jung, Philip Zimbardo, all of these things. All right, so Carl Jung had a lot of thoughts about mass psychosis. There's a Latin proverb that he often quoted that says, man is wolf to man. And Carl Jung said this proverb was a sad but eternal truism. Indeed, if ever becoming more obvious, he writes, that it is not famine, not earthquakes, not microbes, not cancer, but man himself who is man's greatest danger to man, for the simple reason that there is no adequate protection against psychic epidemics, which are infinitely more devastating than the worst of natural catastrophes. Basically, people are scarier than monsters or earthquakes or anything else that nature can throw at us. Us, humans. And remember, Simon tried to tell them that. If you guys remember a couple chapters back, it was Simon who was trying to say, we are the beast, you guys. We are worse. We need to be careful because we are dangerous. And they all brushed him off. Another quote by Carl Jung: crimes that the individual alone could never stand are freely committed by the group, smitten by madness. So, yes, Piggy and Ralph are trying to reconcile this. I wouldn't kill Simon. I wouldn't automatically jump with my spear and my rock and kill something that crawled out of the jungle without knowing what it was, but they're in a group, and so this new crime is committed freely by the group, and so they get caught up in the hysteria. Look at any time ever when people have been driven by mass psychosis. Next year, maybe in 11th grade English, you will read the Salem witch trials, you read the Crucible. And when you talk about the Crucible and the Salem witch trials, you cannot not talk about the idea of mass hysteria and mass mental sickness. So wait for that. All right, so Carl Jung used Nazi Germany as an example of mass psychosis and herd mentality. Just like the Milgram experiment was really a attempt to study why Nazi Germany happened, and a lot of Philip Zimbardo's work ties back to Nazi Germany, Carl Jung was also very interested in how Nazi Germany could happen. Why would mass amounts of people follow Hitler? Why would they do terrible things? Why would people consent to work in a concentration camp? Um, and this is what he came up with. His teachings about the collective unconscious in relation to hysteria or violent behavior pointed to the fact that large groups of people can be led by fear and or the freedom from consequence. Remember, the Milgram experiment talked about this. Freedom from consequence. If I order you to do something that goes against your maybe moral code, but I tell you you won't be held responsible, there are going to be no consequences for your actions, that experiment proved that most people will do it. They'll ignore their moral code and they'll just do it. You see the boys in Lord of the Flies easily being led by fear, absolute fear. They're so afraid of this beast that they're willing to attack anything that comes out of those woods. The individual needs to balance personal and collective unconscious to make sure they are not violating moral and ethic lines. So Carl Jung believed in the collective unconscious, and remember we talked about this with the archetypes, but he also believed that we might be the grove of aspen trees, right, with the shared root system, but we are also an individual tree, right? And within that, I am an individual tree. I am also part of the root system that connects us all. So I have to be very diligent and keep a balance between the influences that are going to conduct my behavior, right? That are going to influence how I behave. So I have to make sure that the collective unconscious or any messages or any sickness that might be floating through the collective unconscious does not compromise what I see as a moral and ethical line. Murder, stealing, robbery, cruel treatment. Okay, so how does this relate to Lord of the Flies? We've been saying a bit throughout, but Jack leads by fear. We've seen that from the very beginning. He succeeds in making the boys believe that they need to hunt and they need to be diligent. He gets them so wrapped up in a frenzy and so happy about having weapons and things to destroy with. He's not about building shelters. He's not about signal fires. He's about a fire so they can eat meat. He's about weapons so not so they can get fruit off of trees, but so they can kill. So he's leading by fear and he's leading by brutality. Simon enters the circle when the boys are already in a hysteria, a frenzy. They are so far gone by the time Simon appears in the shadows that they no longer recognize him as a human. In this mental state, they cease to use reason and logic and they act on their instinct. Remember, Carl Jung called that the shadow. And he said that when we act purely on instinct without using reason and logic and intellect, that it often causes us to do bad things. It often causes us to do negative things. And this is a classic example of that. My instinct says that thing is dangerous, so I kill it without using any kind of reason or logic to determine whether it's actually a threat. So Simon is killed out of a blood frenzy. He is no longer human to them. He has been dehumanized, as Philip Zimbardo discusses, a thing, a representation of their fear. Dun, dun, dun. All right, and this last slide is just our works cited for my research on Carl Jung. Thank you all so very much for listening. Let's go back over to the PowerPoint right now, and I will answer any questions that you guys have. Thanks so much.